Good morning, JC. How you doing?
Hey, JC.
Hey, good morning, guys. Good to be with you.
JC, before Dad goes, we had a guy here on one of the sports shows. I guess Najee Harris was here at camp. When you get the guys to come to your campus for camp, ain't really reason to have a satellite camp. All the guys you want to see come here, and you can actually coach them and evaluate them. But he said he talked to a scout. They watched this kid over here at camp and said that he is the best running back Alabama has ever signed. Is that true? Oh, they haven't signed him yet. My bad. If he does sign, like to put him ahead of Mark Ingram, all the guys over there that have been over there said this kid was the best football player he's ever seen. Had a Coach Scott tell him that.
I mean, he's awfully good. I'll say that. I'll also say that, at running back, it's a position where a lot of the times the big time guys they're really, either just as good as you thought they'd be, like Nick Chubb, and Leonard Fournette, and Royce Freeman, and Marcus Lattimore, and guys like that, or they're like Mark Ingram, who didn't really have a lot of the recruiting hype. He came out of high school, I think, with a high 3-star rating, and they ended up surprising and being very good. I mean, guys like, and that happens at all levels of football. So I'm always cautious about that. And I just, crowning somebody like that, I just don't know, especially based on a camp setting, because running back is played with pads on. And it's a situation where, you can look awfully good in shorts and a shirt and run the 40 and have the size and the measurables and look great. And Najee looks great on film, too, don't get me wrong. But, making that kind of statement, well, when you're talking about comparing him to the greats, I think that's a little premature. A little bit of recruiting hype. So I don't know. Now, they said the same thing about Leonard Fournette when he came out, and I think I even said it. I don't know if I said he was the best running back LSU's ever signed, but he lived up to it. Nick Chubb, before he got hurt, was living up to it, and Harris very well could. But that's Alabama's had 2 Heisman Trophy winning running backs since
Derrick Henry's pretty good,
guys. I mean, that's a tall statement to make, and I think statements like that get to be dangerous and are the reason that we have unnecessary hype around recruiting. I mean, Harris is the number 1 player in the country for this class, but making broad statements like that, as it relates to history, you're going to be wrong most of the time. We've had one guy in recruiting since I've been doing it, really since they've been doing it ever. I think one poll or one set of rankings had Peyton Manning ranked number 1. But the only guy to be ranked number 1 in a class and to go number 1 in the NFL draft was Jadeveon Clowney, who was a once in every 10 years defensive line recruit at a position of high value. Running back's not a position of high value as it relates to the NFL draft. So, very rarely do those statements turn out. I think he's awfully good. Again, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying he's not. But, like I said, Alabama's had 2 Heisman Trophy winning running backs, since during the Saban era. So that's a tall task, I think, for that to end up being valid, but regardless of how great of a high school running back Harris is.
We haven't said much about 9 conference games in the league. We're still at 8 in lieu of the fact that Big 12 is going to go home, goes home and home with a 10-team league and have a playoff game in 2017, and then reshuffle their sides. If their sides are too unbalanced, pretty good idea. Fix them the next year, but so you can comment on that. But besides that, first of all, why do they not want 9 games? Because it's a job oriented? Because they're afraid they'll lose their job? Why is that kind of died down, and why is Nick Saban the only one that likes that idea?
Well, because if you're Florida, for example, and you got to play Florida State every year, you know, that could potentially be 10 games out of a 12-game schedule where you're playing great competition. And,
Okay, good,
you know,
good
it
point.
is a situation. Yeah, that's a large part why we still have the bowls, which I think the bowls are great for college football when they do them right, is because, you know, hey, look, if you don't, if you go 6-6, you go 7-5, you know, for some teams, going to a bowl is a great year, and it's a great experience for the student athlete. You get an extra game, and boosters are happy, and you don't have some of the quick triggers with the firings, you know. So I think, and really, people are getting fired by going to bowl games, you know, at certain programs. So it's not a, you know, it's not a firing resistant kind of plan. I think in the SEC, it's just one of those things where the competition is difficult. You know, there are rivalries you have to protect. You know, there are games that, you know, have to be on the schedule for certain teams every year. You know, I thought when they brought Missouri and Texas A&M in the league, you know, for a couple of years, their scheduling was a logistical nightmare for some schools. I mean, I think A&M went to Ole Miss 2 years in a row. You know, it was just a situation where there were a lot of weird games here and there that happened. It was tough, but you know, going to 9, and they've worked on it. They've sketched it out, and you know, I think they know what they would do if it would happen. But I just don't see it happening anytime soon, especially with the league continuing to be the strongest in the country. You know, barring something where there's an expansion of the playoffs, you know, maybe to 8 teams, and then if you have a team that loses 2, they have a good shot at getting in. You know, maybe at that point they consider it, but I think there's too much working against it for it to happen. Now, from a fan standpoint, I think it'd be great because you'd avoid some of the, you know, Presbyterian College playing at wherever type of games. But, you know, hey, right now I don't think there's any lack of fan support in the SEC. So I think it would have to come down to something to where that made better sense, you know, more so than getting into a 14 playoff.
Okay.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Will.
No, that's it. That's good enough.
Go ahead. We got Martin Houston in with us, JC. Martin's getting ready to start a new show here. He was a fullback here at Alabama from 88 to 92, but he's going to ask you a question here.
Hey, JC, when you look at the SEC in basketball, they've did away with the divisions. Do you see, kind of stand on that same line with what Went was talking about, instead of 9 games, do you see them ever possibly going to just no divisions and kind of setting the schedule that way? Therefore, they guarantee that the best 2 teams are going to be playing in the championship versus, you know, the mismatch that we've had several years as a result of the East being down.
Yeah, it has been several years of mismatches. Now, here's the thing about that. There was an article a few days ago at on SB Nation, a really good article that outlined how they could do it, sticking with the 8 conference games and protecting most of the rivalry games that, you know, schedule-wise, you know, people care about, like Alabama, Tennessee, Alabama, Auburn, those types of things. And it was kind of neat because every school would have 3 permanent opponents, and then you'd have 5 rotating opponents, but they would rotate on even and odd years. And in other words, you know, one year Alabama would play, I think it was Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Auburn. They play them every year. And then in odd years they play, you know, LSU, Florida, blah, 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 going down the list. And then the next year it would flip, and the next year it would flip back. And then that way you play every school in the conference within a 2-year period. And, you know, that'd be something interesting to look at. The problem I have with it is that the Southeastern Conference, as great as it is a highly political type of deal when it comes to, you know, who really is the second best team, because you would have some ties. And you would get to a situation, you know, one of the tiebreakers in the division, once you get past a certain point, is athletic director's vote. And, you know, I would just be concerned that there would be all sorts of controversy, so that would happen more often than it does now with regards to the championship game. Now, does the SEC East need to step up? Absolutely. I mean, we're going on 8 years now of them not being competitive with the West. Is it fair to a program like Ole Miss that probably would have won the East a couple of times and gone to Atlanta? They've never been to Atlanta in their program's history, but they just happen to be cycling up, during a time where the West is the toughest division in football. Is it fair to an Arkansas? I mean, any of those schools over there that, Mississippi State had such a great team a couple of years ago with Dak Prescott, had it not been for Alabama and some of the games they played late in the season, it's tough competition. If they were in the East, they would have won the division probably easily. I think that, I think theoretically it's a good idea. There would just have to be some sort of safeguard, to where it's, it's a little bit, I don't know, it's a little bit non-political. Maybe they go with, division winners, but if the other division winner is 2 games better or something like that, they kick it over to the second place team in the other division. I don't know. There has to be, some sort of way. The other thing it would do, I think, it'd make their coaching jobs in the SEC East a little less attractive, because the buzz among coaches, and there's 3 new SEC East coaches this year, is that the East is like the SEC light. It's not the bloodbath the West is. You can get your program going quicker there amidst an East schedule rather than a West, et cetera, et cetera. So, that's an interesting concept for sure. We all remember the 90s and the East was the better division, and the West was kind of up and down. So is that going to straighten itself out? I don't know. I was looking at 10 more years of the West dominating. If so, I think it's something they need to look at, but they need to give a little more time to see if this trend sort of corrects itself, in my opinion. I mean, it's tough. I mean, who wouldn't have wanted to see Alabama play LSU again in 2011 in the Dome in Atlanta instead of the Dome in New Orleans? I mean, 30 days later. I think that's a good argument to make, but I don't know that the SEC will go in that direction as it stands now.
Well, Dad tells me I'm wrong, but I think if I'm Tennessee, I'm waving the flag and saying, let's get Alabama off the schedule. Let me try somebody else over there. Because it's not fair. It's not a balanced schedule. They have to play Alabama every year. Everybody says, oh, yeah, but you remember 12 years ago when they had their own winning streak. That's for another show. But, JC, Alabama seems to be on a hot streak with commitments in football. I think they've got 14 now. Maybe mention a couple of those guys. But let me ask, at what point do you kind of stop and not take so many commitments? Because I don't know if these guys are recruiting or selecting over there. I think they're selecting. But do you take this many commitments this early? Have you really fully evaluated those guys? I'm sure the staff knows what they're doing there. Their new guys seem to be recruiting well also. Is this smart to take this many commitments this early? And talk about a couple of them if you want to.
Well, yeah, I mean, it just depends on, you're Alabama, and they've earned the right, I think, to take whoever they want. I mean, as far as the evaluation process goes, because, they've evaluated pretty doggone well. And that's the thing about them. They just don't take the star-rated guys. A lot of their guys are highly star-rated, but they take... they take guys that they've evaluated that have gone through the process. As far as if they're going to take a whole bunch more and fill up, I doubt it. I think that they also do a good job of holding spots back, of reevaluating their board, and then of being able to go get, players that may be senior risers, late in the process. So I think that, their guys, they do a good job no matter when they're taking the commit. I think right now what you're seeing, though, Barry, is in college football, you have sort of recruiting seasons throughout the year, and the summer camp season always yields a handful of commits. And so that's why Bama's got some guys coming in. And, I really like it. I don't recall his name because I don't have it sitting in front of me, but the kid they got out of Texas, the cornerback athlete, wide receiver guy, he's supposed to be one of the best all-around athletes in the state of Texas. They continue to recruit Texas at a high level, and this has been happening just in the past 3 or 4 years, to where they can go into that state and sign elite talent. Saban's worked Texas pretty hard since he's been there, but kind of starting with Ashawn Robinson, they've done a great job of going and getting the best of the best out of that very talent-rich state.
That
Nick Saban and them are successful in recruiting because of a big-time inflated budget, much more than the other 13 schools, a lot more. Is that a reason, or was that the big reason, or is it the ability that the new assistants have, or not the new assistants, all of them? Is it their ability to be able to recruit maybe better than other schools? I have felt like the millions of dollars, I think it's $11 million that Alabama spends more than anybody else in the league, and Alabama's success based on that has continued to fuel Alabama with good recruiting years. Is that right or wrong?
Well, you're on to something there. It's a situation where the recruiting money that you spend, a large part of that is on travel. And if you look at it, the last 5-6 years, Alabama has been going across the country, more so than any other school. They've become a true national recruiting school. They always take kids from within the state, of course, but you look at the breakdown right now of their commits: 4 from Alabama, 1 from Arizona, 2 from California, 3 from Florida, 2 from Georgia, 1 from Hawaii, and 1 from Texas. That's a pretty wide net to cast. When you're talking about a program located in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, that you have to go and fly out different places. You go back, I think the average of the 25 guys they've signed in the last few years, it averages 12.5 different states. So they're hitting 12 different states, every class. Look at last year's class. They got 6 from Alabama, 2 from California, 1 from Connecticut, 1 from the District of Columbia, 1 each from Florida and Georgia, 2 from Louisiana, 1 from Maryland, 3 from Mississippi, 1 from North Carolina, 1 from Oklahoma, and 4 from Texas.
wow.
So it's a situation where you look at the other state breakdowns for the various SEC programs, and it's not necessarily this wide net. Now, in general, the SEC has been able to go and do that more, depending on what school you are, but not to the point of Alabama. I mean, Florida's class, for example, last year, they signed a big old class. I think they had 32 or something, or actually 25. They're 25, 13 of them are from the state of Florida. 2 are from Georgia, and then you have a smattering of different states represented. So it's a situation where they recruit in a unique manner, a lot like Tennessee used to under Philip Fulmer. You remember Tennessee used to have gigantic recruiting expenses. Yeah. They still do, to be honest, but it's a situation where Bama just goes anywhere in the country they want to go and recruits the best.
Yeah.
Well, JC, we appreciate it. Tell everybody where they can find you on Twitter and wherever else all your material is.
Twitter, it's at JC Shurburtt, at JCSHURBURTT, and they retweet my handle on Tide991 at Tide991. You can find me and follow me there, or also on 24/7 Sports.
JC, appreciate it, buddy.
Thanks,
Talk
JC.
to you next week.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.